Welcome. I wanted to do an afternoon video on the exegetical outline of Genesis 1. This has to be one of the most interesting texts ever written, and the beauty of it and the form of it is just overwhelming. And so I wanted to do this this video as we look through it. You might notice that there is a pattern within Genesis 1, a repeating theme, and you can see it right off the bat here with Vayomer. 10 times in the text in Genesis 1, 1 to 2, 3, God said, Elohim said, and Elohim said. All these are converted imperfects. And the reason that's interesting, twofold, I suppose. God created the world by speaking. That idea is picked up both in the Targum, where the Memra is the mechanism through which God creates the world, and for Christian readers, it's picked up in John 1. In the beginning was the Word. It's also interesting to me because, as Jewish interpreters have pointed out in the past, the 10 Commandments are called the 10 words in the Pentateuch. And so God at Sinai, through 10 words, is establishing this relationship, developing this covenantal relationship. And here, with the creation of the world, you have God creating through these 10 words, 10 repeated phrases. And Elohim said, said, let there be, and there was. And we see that every time God says something, God said, let there be a rakia, and it happened. So God saying, and then whatever God says is exactly what happens. Also, this God saw that it was good, kitov, repeated every day except day 2, which you wonder, why doesn't God call the separation of waters on day 2 good? And I suppose it could have something to do with mimicking the division of the waters at the Red Sea, and where some will go into that salvific space and thrive through their relationship with God, and some will go into that salvific space and perish, like Pharaoh's army. The Septuagintal translators, when they came to day 2, couldn't quite handle that we don't have God saw that it was good, and so the Septuagintal writers actually add that phrase, but in the original Hebrew manuscripts it did not appear. For Christian writers, John in Revelation may pick up this idea of the division of waters, and God not calling that good, because in the new heavens and the new earth there are no seas. And so perhaps the writer of the Apocalypse is picking up that there's something a little off about day 2 in terms of introducing something in the narrative that we as readers will have to decide, well, why is that the case? Some Jewish interpreters explain the omission of day 2 that God is not finished creating until he creates the land and the plants, and that could be it as well. But you do have this very repeated text, and then on day 2 you don't have this, and so that's a question. We know from the preface, the way I'm understanding this preface is everything. God created everything, and he said, and then, you have this phrase, God created the haaretz, and immediately you're faced with the tension. How does that relate to Israel's inheritance of the land later? Is this Haaretz related to that at all? John Sailhammer, in his Pentateuch's narrative, would suggest there is some relationship, and certainly by the time we get to chapter 2 and the rivers, we have at least the boundaries of the promised land are somehow tied in with the rivers of Eden. We have an interesting feature here. The Haaretz was tohu vabohu. Interesting phrase, usually negative, nearly universally negative. In Jeremiah, the text appears of land of Israel after it had been judged, and so it's a little unclear how we're to think about this initial state of creation, that it was somehow tohu vabohu. Some of the Jewish interpreters think it has to do with the land being devoid of people, and that's certainly a possibility. When we come here, darkness is on the face of the Tehom. The Tehom is a bad thing. You look at nearly every single use, it's in some kind of negative setup, and we already mentioned how, at least in the Christian text, they're picking that up with the new heavens and new earth not having a Tehom. The Septuagintal writers translate that abusos, abyss, and we know from elsewhere, at least in the Christian text, the demons are terrified about going to the abyss and beg not to be sent to the abyss. And somehow we have these negative elements. Darkness is on the face of the abyss until this first positive thing happens, the Ruach Elohim, God's Spirit. There's the same Spirit in Ezekiel 36 and 37 that comes and breathes life into the dead army. The new covenant promises of God sending his Ruach. And then we have this PL participle hovering over, used in Deuteronomy. Some Jewish interpreters take this perhaps as a negative thing. The Ruach was attacking. You could look at it as a positive thing, somehow lovingly present. We don't really know at this point in the story, so we just start off with this kind of introductory statement and then these 10 developments. So the first development on day 1, 2 sections. God said, "Let there be light," and the end of that section, there was evening and morning, day 1. This is part of the justification of the Jewish practice of starting the day mid-afternoon. I have a Jewish acquaintance who told me that the day starts if you turn your back to the sun and look straight out, when you can see the shadow in your peripheral vision that the day is passing into the next day. It seems like that view is reflected, at least in the Christian writings. In Luke, it talks about the Sabbath dawning, and it's talking about a late afternoon entity there, and so it may be tied up with this text. There are others who would say that that's the wrong way to interpret this, but at least raises a question for the intelligent reader. God saw, God divided, God called. This is interesting. God saw that it was good. This will be repeated many times. The first time the text says something is not good is God saw that it was not good, or he says it was not good for Adam to be alone. And then this is repeated with Eve in the negative. She saw that the tree was good, and so she's perhaps usurping the place of God at that point. And And then even in the debated text in Genesis 6, the sons of God, which I'm taking as a description of the people of God, that's how it's used elsewhere, those who are submitting to God's will, saw that the daughters of Ha-Adam were good. I think it's translated beautiful in the English text, but it's picking up this same phrase, so-and-so saw that it was good. When we come to the description of days, this is interesting because you have cardinal numbers, day 1, Yom Echad, which elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible, that's usually translated a day. If Jacob says, if I drive the flocks Yom Echad, they'll perish, and why should I lose 2 sons in Yom Echad, a day? And even in the Zechariah text, it talks about the eschatological day as Yom Echad. So you have this cardinal, but then for days 2, 3, 4, and 5, these are ordinals, and they're anarthrous ordinals. So a day or day 1, a second day, a third day, a fourth day, a fifth day. We come to the 6th day, and it's the 6th day. And then when we come to the 7th day, into chapter 2, 3 times it says the 7th day, the 7th day, the 7th day. And so for the informed reader, you have to ask the question, well, why is day 6 being picked out? Why day 7? Why does day 7 have no evening and morning, day 7? And so just a lot of interesting things going on in this beautifully artistic text. We get the creation on day 2 of the rakia. This is a very interesting feature. It's picked up in Ezekiel 1 and 10 of this heavenly throne room vision. Ezekiel's looking through some kind of crystalline structure, and he sees cherubs on the other side, and then on the other side he sees God in the chariot vision. That same crystalline structure appears when God is at Sinai, at least in the Septuagint. It says he's standing on something like a crystal pavement. I think the Septuagintal writers translate that stereoma, the solidness or the firmness. And for Christian readers, perhaps picked up in the Christian text of the crystal sea, when the people go through, they sing the song of Moses there in Revelation 15, just like God's people sang the song of Moses when they went through the Red Sea. And so, and the Red Sea is called the Tehom, and the Red Sea dry land appears. So you have this, just as you have 10 plagues that kind of uncreate Egypt, you have God creating in 10 words, culminating or starting off with this division of waters and the rakia. It seems to me it's introducing some kind of salvific space, theme of God creating salvific space. I think what we'll do is I'll stop there, and we'll pick up on day 3 on another video. So I hope you enjoy this, and I'll look forward to your comments in the link below. So I hope you have a great afternoon.